Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I've come up with an interesting topic, and by the title and the thumbnail you probably already know that I'm going to talk about IELTS. So I'll be sharing with you some important IELTS tips and tricks so that you can get an overall band score of 8 or higher in the examination. These tips and tricks are completely from my own experience throughout my IELTS journey, so I hope it will be beneficial for you. So I'll divide this video into 4 sections, and in each section I'll talk about IELTS listening, then reading, writing and speaking. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So first and foremost, let's discuss listening. In listening, you get 40 minutes and 40 questions. You have to answer 40 questions within 30 minutes, and you get an extra 10 minutes to transfer your answer to the answer sheet. Normally in listening, part 1 is the easiest, and it slightly gets difficult as it progresses. So my first tip for IELTS listening is to multitask. The recording will be played once, you will not hear it a second time, so you must be able to read all the questions and look for answers and write down the words all at the same time. My second tip for IELTS listening is to never write answers on the answer sheet from the time when you start hearing the audio. Always write answers on the question paper first, because if you write on the answer sheet and if you find an answer wrong, then you'll have to erase it and rewrite it again. The examiner might find it difficult to read and you will end up losing marks. So always write answers on the question paper first, and you get an extra 10 minutes to transfer your answer to the answer sheet. So this is more than enough to transfer all your answers. So always write on the question paper. My third tip for IELTS listening is to guess the answer. Never leave an answer blank, because you will anyway lose marks. So it's better to always guess the answer. Who knows, it might be correct. My fourth tip for IELTS listening is to read the questions carefully. Always read the questions 2 to 3 times so that you can understand the question, because sometimes in the listening the questions might confuse you. If it says write no more than 1 word, then do not write 2 words. If you do so, your answer will be wrong. So make sure you read the questions carefully and then answer the question. My fifth tip for IELTS listening is for MCQ, multiple choice questions. When you answer MCQ, don't write the answers directly on the answer sheet. Write the options, the alphabets. If it's A, then write A. If it's B, then write B. And if it's C, then write C. My final tip for IELTS listening is to never procrastinate. By procrastinate, I mean don't lose focus. If you lose focus, you will miss all the answers and you will lose all your marks. So practice at home beforehand to build up the ability to concentrate. Now let's talk about IELTS reading. In the reading part, you get 3 passages and you have to answer 40 questions within 60 minutes. There's no extra time to transfer your answers like in the listening section. My first tip for IELTS reading is to familiarize yourself with the different types of questions. In IELTS reading, there are around 14 different types of questions, so get yourself acquainted with all the types of questions. Also, there are some questions that come in order and some don't. So it's better to familiarize yourself with the different types of questions. My second tip for IELTS reading is to follow the scanning and skimming method. Scanning means to find out a particular keyword from the passage, whereas skimming means to read the passage lightning fast. By lightning fast, I mean you don't read the passage slow. You read the passage in a very fast manner in order to get a general idea about the content. So if you can follow these 2 methods successfully in the real examination, you will see that you will be able to save up a lot of time and you will find the answers easily. My third tip for IELTS reading is to never try to understand the full passage. You will waste your time reading the full passage. Your job is to locate the answers only. There are only 2 types of questions that require a more detailed understanding of the passage, and that's matching headings and choosing a title. The rest questions are based on locating answers only, so don't waste your time reading the passage. Read the questions and just locate the answers. My fourth tip for IELTS reading is to become a grammar Nazi. By grammar Nazi, I mean you have to be an expert in grammar, because in IELTS reading there are question types such as sentence completion and summary completion that requires the answer to be grammatically correct. So if you become a pro at grammar, then you'll be able to spot the correct answers easily. My fifth tip is for list of headings. Don't read the whole passage to find out the correct headings. The answer lies on the first and the last 2 sentences of the paragraph. So don't read the whole passage, it's a complete waste of time, and you will be able to save up a lot of time if you read the first and last 2 sentences. And also keep in mind that the answers will be in paraphrase form. They will use synonyms, so be careful about that. My final tip is to practice reading enough at home. If you don't practice enough, then you'll find the passages difficult at IELTS examination. You can practice from the Cambridge books or from online. And also make sure to use a timer so that you can complete the passages within 60 minutes in the examination. Now let's talk about IELTS writing. In writing, you get 2 tasks. In writing task 1, you have to spend 20 minutes. Whereas in writing task 2, you have to spend 40 minutes. It's completely up to you the way you want to use your time. However, it's recommended that you spend 40 minutes on writing task 2 as it's broader than task 1. In writing, you will be marked on 4 different criteria: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, vocabulary, and grammar. There are 6 different types of questions in IELTS writing task 1. So it's better to have a general idea about them so that you don't get confused in the IELTS writing. On the other hand, academic writing task 2 is a formal essay. The types of questions that you'll encounter in writing task 2 are the opinion-based, advantages and disadvantages, discussion, direct questions, and solutions. My first tip for IELTS writing is to use more compound and complex sentences. The examiner wants to see how much do you know about the sentence structures. So use less simple sentences and try to use more complex and compound sentences to get a good score in writing. My second tip for IELTS writing is to not go off topic. Don't go off topic in IELTS writing, because if the examiner finds your answer irrelevant, then he will cut your marks. My third tip for IELTS writing is not to use vocabulary if you don't know how to use them the correct way. Use simpler words that make sense, and don't use vocabulary that doesn't make sense in a sentence. My fourth tip for IELTS writing is to read the question again and again. If you don't understand the question, then your answer might be irrelevant and you'll end up with a lower mark in writing. My fifth and final tip is to practice, practice, and practice. To be a better writer, you have to write every single day. Be it a blog or a story about yourself. Write anything that pops up in your mind. By writing, you'll be able to find out your weaknesses, and then you can strengthen them so that you can get a good score in IELTS writing. Now let's talk about speaking. The final part of IELTS is speaking. Let me clear one thing about speaking. It's an informal test. The examiner won't test how knowledgeable you are. He wants to see how well you can speak English. So you can go slight off topic, but it should make sense. IELTS speaking consists of 3 parts. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, and the speaking part lasts about 15 minutes. My first tip for IELTS speaking is to try to give full answers. Don't limit your answer to just yes and no. Remember, this is an English speaking test and the examiner wants to know how good your English is. If you give very short answers, then there's no way the examiner can know how good you can speak. My second tip for you is to paraphrase the question while answering. Don't repeat the question. If the examiner asks you, "What food do you like?" don't say, "I like mango." Instead say, "I fancy mango." Use synonyms and paraphrase the question. My third tip is to stay natural. Don't learn anything from home and don't give scripted answers. The examiner will find it out by the tone of your speaking. So it's better to stay natural and always give logical answers. My fourth tip is to stay careful about grammar. While speaking, you can make minor mistakes, but if you constantly make grammar mistakes, then your marks will be deducted. So be careful about grammar while speaking. Now let's talk about part 2. Part 2 is a cue-card question where you are given 1 minute to prepare your answer and 2 minutes to speak. This 2 minutes feels like the longest 2 minutes of our life. But don't worry, answer according to the question and don't speak too fast or too slow. Speak logically and give a relevant answer. Make sure to practice speaking at home for 2 minutes, setting a timer, and it will help a lot in the real examination. For part 3, always use an example while giving an answer, because part 3 questions are based on part 2. So if you get a question about mobile phones in part 2, then the examiner might ask you a question on how will the mobile phones change in future in part 3. So the questions are related, therefore give the answer logically with an example. To improve your speaking, you have to practice every single day for at least an hour. Remember, you can be a better writer, but if you don't practice enough, then you can't be a better speaker. So it is recommended to at least practice for an hour every single day to improve your speaking. And finally, I would suggest you guys to not look for excessive tips and tricks on the internet, because you are not going to remember all of these on the exam day. So make sure to learn some useful tips and tricks that are really going to help you, and make sure to practice enough. If you don't find yourself suitable and if you don't think you are ready for the exam, then don't sit for it. Always make sure to practice enough, and when you are confident, then sit for the exam. It should take you a maximum 2 months to prepare for your IELTS examination. So I hope you found this video informative, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, make sure to share this video with your friends and families so that they can be benefited too. Thanks for watching.